Thank you, everybody, for coming. Mike and Brady are on their way. And I don't believe we have anybody remotely participating today. And did we hear from them? Didn't she say something last time about being on a trip or something, or did I? But we haven't. Last year. Yeah. So long. The minutes of our December meeting. Thank you, Sierra. Revisions, questions, comments, additions. Oh, here comes me.
Just a note for everybody, when I sent the handout out to the board, I mentioned that there were 2 typos corrected in the version of the minutes that are in your handouts that weren't in the original draft you saw. So it's fine to go ahead and vote on them, but just so that everyone's on the same.
There are no additions or corrections. May I have a motion to accept the minutes as corrected?
I'm so moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Okay. Next up, announcements. That would be no announcements. Okay. Members of the public are invited to comment at this stage in our meeting.
Looks like we don't have anybody in person here, and there are 2 members of staff attending. If either one of you would like to make a public comment, use the Zoom raise hand function now, please. I don't think there's any public comment today, Tony.
All right, move on. Sarah Elizabeth is here. Thank you for joining us. Let's talk about our staff trustee intranet.
Let me bring this up for you all and introduce the those of you who have not met Sarah Elizabeth, JMRL Digital Services Coordinator, who has done a lot of work both to launch our newish website and also to remake the staff intranet. And she's going to give us a little whirlwind tour of Look Ma new intranet for your continuing ed today.
I usually say I'm just generally the web manager. What I do manage is everything in our web presence minus social media. So all the different parts and pieces that make up our website. I'm going to go to the next slide. So the intranet, just to establish what an intranet is and who it's for. An intranet is an internal website for staff and the organization as a whole. And it's meant to be a resource for all staff to be on the same page in terms of documents and resources and information, including you all as trustees. And yeah, that's just generally in a nutshell. So JMRL has had an intranet as long as it's had a website, as far as I can tell, since the early 2000s or even the late 90s. And along with the classic JMRL org, that's what the classic site looked like.
Forgotten.
If you've forgotten.
Don't forget we won the 2022.
Take a picture. Yeah, it's staying like that forever. The classic intranet, which you had to log into, it was a shared username and password. Everyone logged in with the same username and password since the 90s. I put a banner up when we moved on, but scroll down a little bit. It looks very similar to the classic website, that they were built in the same technology in the same way, and they were updated and styled in tandem together. Okay, so go back to the presentation. Okay, so in June 2023, year and a half, almost 2 years ago, we launched the new website, jmrl.org. That did not include launching a new intranet. The new website was, the intranet was not built within the website, and that was a conscious decision because we wanted to kind of tease these 2 sites apart. There are 2 different websites, and they serve two different purposes. So since June 2023, we've been working on evaluating, rebuilding, and just completely redoing all the work that was done for the public-facing website we did for the intranet since June 2023. And this past December, we officially said new intranet is launched. We did a kind of soft launch in September-ish, October-ish. We had managers look at it. Slowly, links were pointing to it, but in December 2024, it became the official site. It's now a Google site in our Google Workspace because JMRL is wholly a Google Workspace organization. We built it right within the tools that we have. So next slide. Just some background as to why we built it in the Google website, Google site. We wanted to build it in, and all the evaluation that went to rebuilding this. So it was a completely new site. We needed better security by far, better information organization, easier to maintain. The old one, like the old website, was really annoying to maintain. And the only person who really had access to maintain it was my position. And we wanted to keep it simple. We wanted to keep all our tools simple. So building it yet another website and yet another tool sounded more complicated and unnecessarily complicated. So given all these parameters, and we evaluated Drupal, WordPress, we looked at maybe making it a wiki, and Google Sites. Ultimately, Google Sites was the best solution for what we wanted. Now, anyone with a jmrl.org email address can log into it, no one else. And we reorganized the content and made it a much easier site to maintain in terms of anyone. We can give permissions to any jmrl.org user to edit parts of it. So go ahead and go to the next. So anyway, Google Sites checked all the boxes. The content reorganization was based on feedback, but also what people kept saying they couldn't find. You know, complaints. Where is this? I want to be able to do this. This doesn't serve me well. So mostly, you know, the negative feedback too. We also took advantage of Google shared drives so that the Google Workspace owns all the content, not some user. So if I leave, Sarah Elizabeth at jmrl.org doesn't own the stuff. jmrl.org owns the stuff. So lots of detail, but this is all important about security and sharing and sustainability of this website.
I like the line, now a single source of truth.
Yes, yes. So part of the reason why it was not built in our public-facing site is our public-facing site had a copy of a policy. The intranet had a copy of a policy. Google Drive had a copy of the policy. There were copies of the same policy everywhere. And part of this was we tried to cut that down, not just policies, but any document. Routing slips. Everyone saved their own version of the routing slip for every branch in their own personal folders. Well, now it's just on a shared drive folder. So you can just access that and you don't need to find where you saved it on your local machine. Go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so part of this, like I said, I talk about policies as a single source of truth because we want to also eliminate the duplicative display and uploading all this stuff of the policy manual. And we needed it in the intranet to go along with procedures and forms, and we needed the public facing. So along with this project, in the year and a half that we built this, is we redid the policy manual on the public facing site. So yeah, you can go ahead and open that. I don't know if you all have seen this. This is what the new policy manual looks like. It's just links. It all goes to the Google shared drive. The Google shared drive is a single source of truth for the policy manual. And the forms, the public facing forms. So go ahead and go back. the previous policy manual, just to refresh memories. Oh, we should have opened that. Never mind.
It's not private.
Well, you can proceed. Go ahead and proceed. I just don't have a secure certificate on this. This is my staging site. If you scroll down a little bit, the policies were displaying kind of, sort of, not really. It was hard to read. It was scrolling forever. It was a pain to navigate, a pain to read. We eliminated all this kind of stuff. This is kind of like a first stab at a policy manual. We made it a simpler, just massive menu.
It only displayed the first page of each one.
Yeah, yeah, it was
Yeah.
it was a good stab, but it didn't serve our needs well, and the quality of the PDFs was terrible. Okay, so we redid the policy manual for the public facing site, did it in the shared drive, and now we have it on the intranet. And along with all the policies, we have every procedure that goes with the policy.
And these are just links
These are links to the shared drive, and they're Google Docs. We converted them all to Google Docs because many of them were old Word documents, some so old that Word complained about opening. So this is a massive project that both Kayla and I and Sierra did in converting a lot of these documents to Google Docs. They're in one shared drive that's owned by JMRL, and then they're accessible by staff who have a login. And this makes it easier to go through and see what needs to get updated or what is out there.
And just a plug for this page, because the board should have easier access to this intranet now, intranet.jmrl.org. We have a lot of conversation about policies in this committee, and in this board. The policy committee has a lot of discussions about them, and then sometimes we'll talk about staff procedures, which are the associated. Okay, well, how does the staff make the board's vision happen? So you all should be able to see those in an easier fashion using this site.
Yeah, actually, you just mentioned something that's new with this new intranet is a new URL. It's we've worked for the past 3 years to make everything what it is .jmrl. They're all subdomains. So we have blog.jmrl, we have intranet.jmrl, we have this. Well, we'll work on the find it, the catalog part. We're getting there. And so that's very important, you guys, the policy manual. Another important one to be aware of, this is kind of new for the intranet, we have a regional branch resource page. Hang on.
You want to see that? Sorry.
Yeah, it's just a little slow loading. We do have stuff embedded in it and is a little slower loading. Scroll up for me just a little bit. Okay, we've also embedded different documents that staff would inevitably chat someone asking for the information or maintain their own versions of this document. Every manager was maintaining their own versions of this document. So we embedded a lot of this to try and cut down on that. Kayla also created some stats to look at for circulation. And that's embedded there. Now, if you have to go to the north side. So an example of a home page for each branch, you have key information like, for new people, they don't know this. This is good to have.
I don't think the board would know that.
Well, this is shorthand language that we use. It's idiomatic to our system. So that's useful. This is useful. So we tried to put as much useful information in these pages as a shorthand for staff. Directories are a huge thing. That was a massive, massive request for staff, is how do I find out who is the reference person, who is the circ person, and what is their number. We have the fact sheets. This, again, documents that were duplicated in so many places. Now there's a single source of truth. And staff still keep their own copies, but we're working to kind of get that culture of this can be your source rather than save it somewhere in your own drive and figure out where you put it and all that kind of stuff, or find it in your email somewhere.
Can I do a little JMRL history here?
Sure.
So the RI, every branch has a 2-digit letter code that when we first automated and put on an online catalog, every branch got assigned. Central Library is MN for Maine. Gordon Avenue is AG for Avenue Gordon, I guess. Northside was just coming online and hadn't been named yet, and so it was RI for Riverside. I think that was the potential name in like 1990 or whatnot.
And I thought it was because it was on Rio Road. So again, I didn't come from libraries, and when I first started here and people said, well, I'm going to RI this afternoon. You know, I made myself a little shorthand sheet that I kept on my desktop. I thought, well, if I'm doing this, someone else is doing this. So let's make this successful for everyone. If you go back to the presentation, what else did I have? Another thing that we did was we organized the intranet by service departments. This organization's all new for stuff. So we have regional resources like links to volunteer stuff, the customer service manual. Scroll down a little bit more.
Brittany says she thought it was Rivanna.
Oh, well, okay.
Meredith confirms it was Rivanna, not Riverside.
This is another thing that staff didn't have a good, or this was a clunky list to maintain whenever notaries changed. And that was just a Word doc that had to be edited and then uploaded and then forgotten about and then out of date and stuff. This is now, the ones with the orange top are the groups. So we have a lot of Google groups that staff are part of, and that's how they get messages and communicate within the groups. And here we have the list of groups. So you can see that notary@jmrl.org goes to this list of people, and this is where they're located. Same thing for the periodicals. Under collections management, Meredith has her collections liaisons as a group. So we have all this reference material about who is doing what and where. And I think, oh, and the last one that would be near and dear to your hearts would be the business and administrative stuff. So this is all stuff that David and Jerry work in. And then further down is a link to the public policy manual and then a link to the procedures. And then further down, we have the manager's meeting notes and who the heck all of the managers are. That's a quick nutshell. I could go on forever. I've been living this for quite some time, but it is done now. We're almost done retiring the 20-year-old website, which was essentially 2 websites, and moving forward. So, yeah.
Sarah, who has a question about read and write privileges to this? How's that determined?
In terms of the documents in the shared drive or the
well, I mean,
intranet?
in terms of the internet as a whole. Obviously, you've got control of the whole infrastructure, the whole structure of the thing, but then the individual documents, you know, is that just you, or do other people have rights to write?
So Google, well, let me answer it and let's see if that covers what you're asking.
Sure.
So Google introduced shared drive only about 6 months ago, which now JMRL as an organization owns everything. There is no single owner like my user or director or something like that. So that's who owns the documents, and then we can give content managers and editor privileges to cascading directories and then files below that. So it's kind of a cascading read write. Everything is readable. We can just, with Google permissions, we can set anyone in JMRL organization can read and view. Some of this stuff, we did make the policy manual outside the intranet shared drive to its own shared drive because it's a public facing thing. So now anyone with a link can see it, but only certain people can modify or edit. The intranet, we have content, again, it's owned by jmrl.org as an organization, and then we have content managers. That's an all or none. So we have a select, Sierra, David, me, Kayla, about 5 or 6, or actually the IT department. And that just makes it possible that more than one person. The previous one was all HTML pages and CSS, and it was just me editing HTML poorly. So does that kind of cover
Yeah,
what you were
that's
asking?
great. Yeah,
So to me, this looks like this is kind of a formal, an environment for formal published information that's deemed valuable to, to staff mostly. What is the environment for, like 2 or 3 people are working on a draft document, like it's not ready to be there, or maybe it'll never be there? What's that environment?
Everything we do is in Google, and that's what we encourage, because then you can have shared editing and stuff like that. So we're trying to use we're trying to keep our tools.
And so presumably then that would all be findable, searchable by everyone.
You can do permissions separately for documents if you own the document. So yes, the published for the staff are in the shared drive, but individual drives, and that's where the shared drive really came into play, is that, yes, the official stuff's in that shared drive, but if there's a document that I own, like that presentation, I shared it with just David and Kayla. And
so it's kind of like the public experience with Google Docs, where it's like I can share a doc with people, but it's not.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
We have different groups, like the board uses this too. The board's committee groups basically can share docs with that. So like the policy committee has a folder that's shared with the policy committee, and they can easily drop any docs, or everybody can edit, and everybody in the policy committee can see that. But if one needs to come up to the full board, then we open up the permissions and make it either the full board or everybody in the world or everybody.
And so I'm guessing that there must be a process for, like, let's say someone creates a document internally and people are finding it useful, like, hey, can you give me a link to that? Can you add me? At some point they say, hey, do you want to put this on the intranet, because like everyone's asking for it.
I've been doing some of that chasing down. That's where I keep an ear and eye out for, oh, that sounds like something that a lot of people could use, or I'm sure a lot of people have looked for. Let me get it to the intranet. Yes.
I think on the old intranet, we used to maintain a quick links section, which is like, oh, here's the stuff people really want to know. And like, it was one way that I think Sarah knew that the architecture was no good, was that everybody wanted everything to be a quick link. There was no good way to find it if it wasn't like right on the homepage. So pretty soon the quick links was like 20 things that are the
Longer quick.
yeah, like the slow links.
Well, to answer kind of what you're asking about, so this structure and intent is still pre-fresh, and it's a new change. It's a change of culture in terms of the information. It's still going to take a while for staff to kind of get used to it. One thing that they did ask for, so to answer your question, we're still chasing things down and establishing that process of getting things into the shared drive and whatnot. We have a project to get all the manager meeting notes out of people's individual nooks and crannies into a shared spot. There's going to be some ongoing archive projects like that.
I think a good example is when Haley Tompkins left JMRL, and she was a power user as the manager of the Crozet Library. There was a lot of documentation that was Crozet specific, like here are the procedures for this building and whatnot, but she was very regionally involved in a lot of committee work. So was the owner of like tons of documents that if we were just to blow her account away, they would be gone. So we had to identify those and figure out which ones really belong to the Crozet branch manager and which ones need to move into a more regional, like this belongs to the organization.
Yeah, we're still chasing down stuff like that. And I mean, it's a change of culture and using the tools. But another feature that's very important that was so outdated, it was broken, and I wasn't taking time to fix it on the old intranet, was a search. The technology that was built in it was PHP 5 from 2005. But with the Google site, the search works beautifully, and it goes, I mean, it's all Google. So it's their tools that they can't get right. It's not working. So that's a big thing that staff, quick links and a search. That's how they're going to do it. but we also tried to make it much more intuitive for what they're looking for than what the old structure was. So. More questions? Feel free to write any questions about where anything is or what or who or why to Web Manager.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sounds like that was a momentous task.
Yeah.
A continuing momentous task.
Okay, next item on the agenda is Technology Committee report. Wednesday?
So, let's see. Yeah, so this was the first meeting since May 2023. And so it was kind of, an organizing meeting. We had two major agenda items. First was JMRL technology update and current status. So David pointed us to the formal mandate policy 1.23, just to promote the technological vision for JMRL, ensure operational decisions regarding technology are delegated, and work with staff to draft and update JMRL's technology plan as part of strategic plan. That's why we have a technology committee, among other backstory, I guess, not worth going into. So then we had 3 presentations from staff of kind of, what's going on and what they're responsible for in technology. And I'm just skimming the surface here, but Kayla talked about digital services, computers, lockers, assistive technology, and the ethical use of AI. Sarah talked about the website, the catalog, the events calendar, help desk tickets, and the intranet. Fred talked about emerging technology, maker spaces, training staff, and the challenges with staff turnover. And so then we had a discussion of the second item was the discussion of the technology committee's future goals and objectives. And we're actually going to come back to that in our next meeting because one of the real challenges is going to be defining the scope and the priorities. David gave a review of the 5-year plan and the staff implementation plan as they relate to technology. And so then we covered a whole bunch of topics, like I said, scope and priorities and how we're going to work through that. The notion that technology is it's really the kind of the cutting edge of the library. It's the fastest moving area. And so we kind of need to recognize that the technology committee may have a role of just kind of helping the board as a whole stay up to date with what's going on. We talked about the website and the need to, have some sort of continuous improvement plan for that. We touched on cybersecurity, and I saw people's faces kind of look a little. I saw fear pass across people's faces because of the risks of being hacked and so forth. And we talked a little bit about the fact that this is true institution-wide, but particularly within technology, JMRL is understaffed and underpaid. And technology has been an area where you go into a tech firm and you can be paid a pretty high salary, and so I think that problem is especially acute within the technology staff. And so my personal comments kind of coming out of that conversation are just that as a board, we should be aware that there's a tremendous dependence of the library on technology, the catalog, the website. These are to some degree single points of failure where it's like the whole library goes down if those go down. And again, from a board level perspective, to me, this just emphasizes that the whole compensation issue is not only important but urgent, right? Like when you're understaffed and undercompensated, you can't fix the understaffing when you're undercompensated. And so, to me, that strikes me as a system-wide mission-critical problem that the library has, and there's some real risks that the sooner we can start to kind of move forward on that, the better. So as I said, we're gonna at the next meeting, we're gonna talk a little bit more about kind of defining in writing the scope and how we're gonna prioritize what that committee focuses on, because there's actually a massive array of topics we could be talking about, and we need to kind of make sure that we're actually being useful to the library, and that things are aligned with the schedules that, you know, exist with respect to certain technologies that are actually up for being changed out or whatnot. So, anyone else from the committee? Or David?
Just that, that also you had already reached out to set an April meeting. And I think we agreed quarterly was the target for the committee meeting. Not every other month.
Yeah.
but-
David, could you say a few words about what we do organizationally to maintain a sort of a list or an understanding of market values for various positions, especially sort of mission critical bottlenecks like David has identified?
Yeah, well, we've been in a 2-year process now of doing a review of our pay scale, and that involved 2 separate market analysis projects. One, we worked with the city of Charlottesville. They were working with a third-party contractor who reached out and collected a lot of government data. So we got some good information there, and I can pull out the, you know, some specific positions, but not every specific position at JMRL. We kind of got mashed in a little bit with some other things. Across the board, most of our positions were 20% under market value, but I don't know specifically what it was for the IT related positions, which we have. Those are very specific jobs that we have. So one of the issues there was that it was a little bit apples to oranges. We've talked about quite a bit that study was looking at other government entities and not necessarily at libraries. So we went and did this again, looking at peer libraries throughout the state, and also looking at the library systems that were used by the salary comps that Charlottesville and Albemarle used. So Charlottesville looked at these 10 jurisdictions as our main. These are our comps for salary. We looked at what their library pay was, basically.
You know, I would just observe, so that sounds good, and I'm glad that we're a couple of observations. One, I understand part of the salary plan is fitting into, it's a 2-way process, because it's what the jurisdictions will fund and what do we need, and it's sort of, we're convincing them that, hey, we can't do function X without funding Y, and they're saying, well, we're not funding Z, and so you gotta fit it in that box. So it's, I see it as a 2-way street. So my question was sort of, independent of all that, is what is the market for a given job, whether or not it fits into X, Y, or Z, you know, from a salary plan. And I think I would just observe that if again, we're talking about in the technology context specifically, a choice of a technologist with certain skills is not necessarily which library organization I'm going to work at. It's, am I going to work at a library organization, or as Peter said, some other opportunity in a different industry. So I'll just observe that. And
Yeah, I guess my comment to that would be that traditionally JMRL has not been able to compete with the market, the actual market for IT
Right.
folks that are competitive. We're looking at other libraries because it's 2 to 3 times an order of magnitude when you go out there to private corporations and like what somebody doing these things can do, even going to the university as opposed to working for local libraries, public libraries.
So that sounds true to me, but I think I'm just observing it probably wouldn't hurt to have another spreadsheet somewhere.
Like here's what
Make $1 billion
doing
we have, yeah.
yeah, I think
That would be context for, you know, some of the other market valuations that you're talking about.
Questions, comments for Peter?
Do we contract out some of the IT work that is particularly like security?
We contract out some of the hosted services. So it used to be when JMRL spun up its first website, it was a server and a box that lived at City Hall or in the library. And now most of those are out at, you know, they're cloud hosted or they're with a vendor. So we are paying them for a lot of things. One of those things is security. So for example, your trustee email is a Google email, and we're turning on Google email security factors, but we're not creating our own tools for it. So we're relying on what they have. We talked about that in the tech committee a little bit. Like JMRL does pay for some sort of, it's closer to training than spam protection, but it's called know before. So every once in a while you might see it in your trustee account, something that's obviously a spam email, and there's a little fish hook you're supposed to click that says this is phishing, and it's kind of training the system to help train our staff on what's bad news. But in general, if the security, if it's an outsourced host, we're relying on their security. If it's a resource that we keep locally, then we're relying on our own, and we do that in tandem with the city of Charleston and their data center.
Have the spammers figured out yet that they just need to put the little fish hook into their?
The fish hook's actually in Gmail, not at the bottom. Click here to report. Don't give them any ideas.
Thank you, Peter. Okay. Next up, we have under old business, we have potential second reading of policy 4.11, which is material selection.
Yes, so we had a first reading of this draft policy last month. And we sort of talked through it. It looks complicated, but there are not, I wouldn't say highly substantive changes. It's sort of some reorganization, a little bit of tone, a little bit of as often the case with these 10-year reviews, just finding things that are not applicable or relevant anymore and sort of moving those back out. You all tell me if we should talk through the whole thing again. I think we sort of were able to talk through part by part last month.
I did have one. There was one question from the board last month, which was about the language around the ALA's Bill of Rights, freedom to read and whatnot. And so the policy committee was tasked with finding where else these things were mentioned in JMRL's policy, and we identified 2 places effectively. So one is in JMRL policy statement, policy 1.0, where it's the same language that used to be in the material selection. So the Board of Trustees also supports the American Library Association's Library Bill of Rights, ALA accepted interpretations, the freedom to read statements, policy recommendations. And then the other one is policy 4.24 reconsideration, where the library supports the Bill of Rights, freedom to read, free access to the library for minors, those types of things. So I feel like, Mike, my sense from the last board meeting was that the board had reached a language that they were happy with there, but if there's still some question about it, it is iterated in a few other places.
Any other questions? Yeah, we did have a good discussion last month on the aspects of this. In your handouts, there is the old version, and then there's the clean draft. My favorite term, clean draft. Any more comments? I guess we can vote on the adoption of policy 4.11. Accept it as revised.
I'll move to accept policy number 4.11 as revised.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Good. Thank you. Second part of old business is our draft budget update.
That's me. So since you all last met, myself and various trustees have met with each of the 5 JMRL jurisdictions. 2 of those, so Brandy and I met with Louisa County, and Peter and I met with Albemarle County, happened before we got the information about the change in 2 years in a row for Louisa, about the change in healthcare.
Increase.
Yes. So we have sent, so 3 of the meetings happened after the jurisdictions had all the information with them. They have an updated budget. What's on JMRL's website right now reflects the 30% increase in healthcare costs. But 2 of them did not, so we sent back information to them, and we got some questions in response. One of the questions was from Albemarle County just about does the city provide any trends or related data to what's driving the 30% increase? The city basically responds that 5 factors went into this: unfavorable medical claims experience, significant increase in large claims activities, significant projected increase to stop loss contract costs, increased pharmacy costs and usage, and enrollment growth. So the city of Charlottesville, I think, was also surprised by the size of this. It's something that they are having to figure out in their own budgeting. I will say that one of the county administrators said to me during these meetings, and they have worked extensively in HR in the past, I have never seen a 30% increase in healthcare over a single year ever. And I had never either until this year, and now I have seen it twice, because both Charlottesville and Albemarle are seeing 30+% increases in their costs. Both of them are self-insured, so that the pool they're dealing with is their own employees. So a bunch of dominoes fall the wrong way, and this is what happens. Last year's increase, we had budgeted for 10%. It ended up being 12 or 13%. It was within, it was over, but it was manageable compared to this. So at this point, we know what the budget process is for our jurisdictions. I'm going to give you a bit of a schedule here for it. This is not a one-time cost that JMRL can put dollars towards and it's gone. Like, we're going to talk a little bit later today about a truck that you can purchase and then you're good until the truck doesn't work anymore. This is an annual thing, this healthcare cost. So while the hope and the belief is that this was an abnormality this year, we have seen some increases over the years. Last year's 12%. I think it was steady for 2 years before that. During COVID, not as many claims, not as many people getting sick. Overall costs were steady for the library, but the last 2 years have been dramatic. So here's what we know about what the schedules are coming up. And you can kind of tune into your jurisdiction here. In Albemarle County, the county executive will present his budget to the Board of Supervisors on February 26th. So at that point, we'll know what the county staff are recommending as funding for JMRL for next fiscal year. There will be agency work sessions in the beginning of March on the 10th and 12th that we will probably be involved in. There will be a CIP work session on the 17th that we will at least listen to, because there's the Central Library Project will be part of those discussions. And then their board will vote on the final adoption of the budget on May 7th, which is a little later than Albemarle has done in past years, but a lot of information to go through. Charlottesville, the city manager, is going to present his budget to City Council on March 4th, which is a Tuesday. They will have a work session for outside agencies on March 13th, which is where they would discuss JMRL. And they're going to have a second reading and approval of their budget on April 14th. So I think they're the first jurisdiction that should have a final decision on what their budget for 26 is going to be. Greene County, the county executive will present her budget to the Board of Supervisors on March 4th. Martha and I have already been invited to a work session on March 11th with the Board of Supervisors there, and on May 13th, their board will vote. In Louisa County, the board's first work session is February 3rd. I haven't heard yet which ones are going to involve the library at this point. They usually have an agencies work session where they'll talk about all of the outside agencies that are requesting funding. Their board is going to vote on April 21st for the fiscal year 26 budget. And Nelson's budget calendar is not set yet. Traditionally, they adopt theirs in June, so their schedule is a little pushed back from everybody. So that's when things are happening. And I know this was a change since the board's last meeting. The impact of the rise in healthcare costs, and I sent you some numbers on that. The overall numbers is about a $223,000 increase from what this board passed in November. So when the board passed this in November, they made a motion to authorize me to include changes to healthcare. I think not realizing it was going to be that dramatic. So that's the current status of where JMRL is in fiscal year 26 budgeting. What questions or discussion do you all have?
So that's Jerry's gonna get me on my zeros again, but that's very roughly a 2% increase over in terms of the entire budget.
This is why Jerry is here today.
To where?
From the original adopted budget to
Increased
the
healthcare.
change to the healthcare increase.
Mike, you're lucky I didn't do the percentages, but it was about from the original 10% increase was to the 30% increase was about $220,000.
Yeah, and I'm asking what percentage of the entire budget.
Off the top of my head, yeah, probably close to 2%, an additional 2%.
Okay, it's about where you are.
And then,
So, it'd be about a 3% increase, if you, like, if you include the original 10% that it was going up.
sure, but yeah, sure.
No, I think
But we already, that was already baked in.
Yeah, that was already baked in, yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to have the original proposed budget in front of me, and I don't write this much.
So right now it shows us a 7.8% increase overall. The prior version was 5.5.
So 2.3%.
And separate question, you said Charlottesville has a self-insured pool and Albemarle has a self-insured pool. Which, are we part of the Charlottesville pool?
Correct. As per the regional agreements, administrative services agreement, there are JMRL contracts with the city of Charlottesville for various services. This is one of them that gets covered.
Thanks.
So at this stage of the game, we are still in negotiation with jurisdictions for, and they have not presented their budgets yet, so we don't really know what their final determination will be when they go to the supervisor and council for jurisdiction. So, one of the things I think that both Charles and Albemarle realize is that this is not something that's in our control. It's, something that I won't say they're inflicting on us, but that they're, this is something they have to deal with on a system-wide. I can't imagine that the other jurisdictions, Louisa, Green, and Nelson, aren't going to face something in this particular category as well. I don't know, but
It's so driven, the way these self-insured pools are, it's so driven by what happened that year.
right.
That I think when Wanda talked to the board of supervisors last week in Nelson, Evan, and Louisa, she, I think, said that they thought it was going to be around a 10% increase for their healthcare costs, which is what I thought we were being conservative by using a 10% number for the original budget you all voted on.
But one of the things that the board has to work with here is, as David said, this is not something that we can just go to our reserves and pull out $233,000 and say, okay, we're done, because this is an ongoing cost. We need the jurisdictions to understand that this cost will, this increase will be baked in, and we're not asking for this as a one-time thing. So that's something that we all need to be cognizant of as we go forward with this thing. On the other hand, I think that the jurisdictions will probably, assessments across the board in all the jurisdictions are up. Okay? I think Albemarle's the assessments were up at least 5%.
We're up 7%.
In the city, yeah. So I'm hopeful here that the pool of money available might be a little bit more, as long as the supervisors and the city council don't say, oh, we've got more money to deal with, so therefore we can dial back the tax rate and level fund, our whole budget. That's just guessing this year. So,
I'll also point out that we'll point out to our jurisdictional partners that this is the first time in many decades where JMRL already, in order to raise the pay scale by 5%, is going to leverage state funding.
Right.
So there's already a pool of money that we're not asking for from our jurisdictions in order to meet the needs of JMRL for next year. And that in and of itself was a big step that the budget committee, personnel committee, the board talked about.
I think it's a very good point to raise. If we get pushback, even if we don't get pushback, we can say, yes, we're utilizing state funding, for a purpose that we have not used it for.
Decades since the 80s.
Yeah.
So I'm anticipating that as we go through that calendar, I'll be in communication with staff and elected officials from all 5 jurisdictions. You may hear from them. Call me if you do. And there might be some mobilization required, either individual board members going to board of supervisors and talking about our budget, or potentially the budget committee getting together to talk about strategies to figure out ways to make this work.
Questions? Comments, suggestions? All right. It is my least favorite phrase. It is what it is. Okay. Thank you, David. So next item up is the JMRL box truck replacement, which we talked about last time in our last meeting. Do you have some of that?
Yeah, and I did bring, Jerry is here in the room with numbers, and he can answer any questions. So basically, it's time to replace one of the box trucks. I let the board know about that last month and said that we would come back this month with a recommendation for the best way to fund that for this fiscal year. So that would be a mid-year purchase we're making. And the fund balances from the end of last fiscal year, which is June. We have not received our official audit yet, which I don't want to talk about, but it should be here any day now. These are going to be very close to the numbers that they have, and if not, it's because their numbers are wrong, because Jerry's numbers are never wrong. The ending fund balance for the operating budget for fiscal year 24 was about $382,710. And the ending fund balance for the equipment budget for last year was $419,755. So the recommendation that the business manager and myself are making is to, I think I put in the, yeah, just to help organize our thoughts about it. Yeah, thank you. Is to expend up to $90,000. The quote that we got was for $86,000, but assuming that we might need some, maybe want to detail it, we might need some shipment or whatnot, from the library's operating fund balance. So this would be one-time money coming from that at the end of last fiscal year, $382,000. If you recall, the library can only carry over 5% of our operating budget in a reserve fund. We can't exceed that amount, or else we have to give funds back to the jurisdiction. So we have a healthy fund balance here. We're anticipating potentially having a surplus in salary savings again in fiscal year 25. So the staff recommendation is to pay for this out of the operating budget.
Comments? Suggestions? Somebody would like to make that motion?
I have a question,
Sure.
just because numbers and I don't get along. So doing this out of the operating budget, that would make the 382 go down to 2, like a high 2, or does that go up to?
It would go
400?
down. We're spending,
Okay.
dipping into the well, but presumably that number was from the end of last June. That might have, that 382
Changed.
might be going up. Like I said, we don't have the official numbers from our auditor yet, but
Just
if we
wanted to
had
be sure I
salary
was
savings. if we
Looking
had-
at it right.
Yeah, that's correct. We're taking that money away from that total.
What other things do we use for the operating?
Operating budget is the entire, it's salaries. That's the big thing. It's salaries and benefits, and then everything that we're asking the jurisdictions for.
Yeah.
Practically, it's just separated from the equipment budget, which is the revenue that JMRL takes in largely from fines and fees.
Make this motion?
So I'm supportive of this motion for today. I'm still interested in understanding within our overall budget structure, since we know we need this 100K every 5 years, what it would look like to amortize that either forward or backward, so that it's not a spike every 5 years, but it's been smoothed out over that time period.
How would that work out with the limit that we have with carryover?
It would either have to come out of the equipment budget, or we would have to budget carefully. Good fiscal management. I think, Jerry, you've got a thought?
Yeah, I think, my understanding is that Charlottesville doesn't do a lease purchase. We purchase it through the fleet department. We don't do a lease purchase as opposed to outright purchase. So probably an alternative to that might be that we, set aside internally our own pool, our own savings account, if you will, set aside for vehicle purchase. So that, usually built up. I'm sorry.
So like if we set aside say 20,000 every 5 years,
So, yeah,
for 5 years.
Well, I'll let you and Jerry.
Yeah, and to Martha's point, that would have to be the equipment fund, like we couldn't really do that. I mean, maybe we could do it in the
yeah,
operating
I've worked
budget,
for
but,
jurisdictions that do, they do lease purchase, so you
Yeah.
can spread those costs out, but
and that would be ideal,
yeah, I'm not aware that Charles with that second job.
that you would kind of pay, you would actually just pay it every year.
Well, I'll let you take the concept offline, but my concern would be 5 years from now, today, great, we have our well is full enough.
Right.
But in 5 years, it happens to be a year when something else also hit. Now we're dealing with 2 spikes.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
What'd you say?
We get another 30% hike on
Yeah,
it there.
something, right, and we had to use it for that, so it just seems sensible to me.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I'm not an accounting person at all.
We employ very fine drivers.
So there's your drivers.
Yeah, that's true.
And the functioning of the vehicle.
Make the motion.
I move that the board authorize JMRL to expend up to $90,000 for the purchase of a new box truck from the library's operating fund balance.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? On to new business, which is the mid-year update on director goals.
That's, I think, next in your. handouts.
Yep.
So this is an annual task that's written into the board's budget schedule for the year. Generally, the board evaluates my performance in the May or June, I can't remember, towards the end of the fiscal year. So this is a chance where I will just tell you my impression of where we are on the 5 goals that I laid out for the board last year. Okay, so the first one was continue work on revising JMRL's pay scale, and these are prioritized. As Peter mentioned, pay being a top priority. This was my top priority this year. It's a new pay scale and developing strategies for funding a new salary structure. This remains a multi-year process, so progress this year could include pursuing intermediary steps to address staff compression and lack of progress on JMRL's pay scale. So work on the new pay scale, as you all are aware, has stalled with changes to the head of HR at the City of Charlottesville. They currently have an interim head, and they have not hired a new head of HR who was working on this project with us. In the meantime, what JMRL has done under my idea was to take the current salary structure that we have, raise it by 5% for next year. So I mentioned that 20% that we were behind a few years ago. So trying to claw that back within our current structure, which worked for a very long time and maybe could continue to work if only it gets fully funded. So that 5% is not going to address that average 20% below market, but it's moving the scale forward. So it's tied into the budget work that we just discussed here. If we can get this budget approved, then I will be happy with kind of 1 year stopgap measure here, but it doesn't solve all the problems that we're facing moving forward. You want to do one at a time, Tony, or?
Please.
Okay.
No, do them all at once. Multitasking in small organizations.
Complete the modernization of JMRL's job description. This project is done. These are all finished and signed off on and available. And when you see JMRL's jobs posted moving forward, they will have a more modern job description there. It was a long project, but I'm happy with the result there. It has loosened up some of our hiring restrictions in order to provide more opportunity for people that are, for example, for the professional librarian position, the language now says you have to have the ability to get certified as a professional librarian in the state within the first 2 years of hire or something, rather than you have to be already certified. As we were hiring trouble there, it's opened up the pools a bit. The flip side of that coin, we haven't tweaked it exactly yet. We're seeing candidates applying for positions that have no experience, thinking that within 2 years they can meet these things. So we're fine tuning it, but the descriptions themselves are complete, and I'm happy with where they are. Those are publicly available, but if anybody would like the URL, let me know. Work with the Central Library Renovation Working Group to secure this project's fiscal year 27 and 29 plans and the CIP program budgets of both Charlottesville and Albemarle for 26. Begin early planning for fundraising and support for 29. So this group has not met, but both Charlottesville and Albemarle currently anticipate sticking to last year's time frame for their CIPs, which is architecture and engineering work in fiscal year 29 and construction, I'm sorry, in 27, and construction beginning in 29. This is also reflected in the city's proposed CIP, which is already available on their website. They just moved everything forward by 1 year. So there's no problem going into this year. Going into next year will be the first time that those two jurisdictions are going to have to commit funding towards this. So that's when we'll have to make another push to remind the current boards and councils at that time that this is something they've committed to for 2 straight years, and it's time to put the it's where the rubber hits the road. Is that right? Yeah. And then in terms of fundraising for that, so around that time, we get a commitment from the city and the county to actually do this project and to spend $1 million to do the A&E. Then this group will shift to being, this group being the Central Library Renovation Working Group, will shift to beginning to talk about fundraising and being a fundraising group. Those members that will want to come over to the fundraising side, it might not be everybody who was involved last year. There might be people that aren't interested. There might be other people that really want to bring in. Formulate reasonable scenarios for board review and evaluation regarding the possibility of a fine-free JMRL. So we have discussed, prepared, and shared some scenarios with the board. This current proposed budget that we were talking about a while ago includes that move of ongoing software costs from the equipment fund to the operating budget. And the goal there was to give maximum flexibility for the board to make a decision about fines and fees by moving those costs where they actually belong, to ongoing operating costs, bring that flexibility there. We presented CEs on potential supplementary funding sources, specifically the Friends of the Library and the Friends Family of Funds, and presented the results of a revenue analysis that pinned the loss at roughly $100,000. That was based on fiscal year 23 numbers. So at any time, Jerry could prepare those numbers again for completed fiscal years, not for the current one. And the last goal was to continue to pursue JMRL website modernization and improvements, including developing long-term strategies for catalog stability and usability. This is an ongoing project. Sarah Elizabeth mentioned some tweaks that have happened in the past year, including a revamp of the public-facing policy manual page. And the technology committee talked about this quite a bit as well. So I consider this to be an ongoing.
And remind folks that in May, we will go into a closed session to have a formal evaluation of these goals and that David has met them, be prepared for it. Questions about goals?
Survey will be going out soon.
What was that?
I said the survey will come out soon.
Probably, actually.
Yeah, right.
Let me make a note.
See, I learned.
Year over year.
I have some questions about number 4.
Yeah.
So all the conversation I've heard so far, or most of it, has been oriented around structurally, how does this work in the budget and how could it be implemented logistically. I don't feel like I'm very well informed on what are the costs and benefits of actually doing this in the first place. And so what I mean is because other places have done this,
Yeah.
right? What was their goal? What did they want to accomplish by doing it in the first place? And what did they learn that actually happened? Did it accomplish whatever that goal was? I'd like to just understand that experience. So one thought I have is, it seems to me, even though a fine fee is not a whole lot for a book in my own life, it provides me a structured reason to turn my book back in today instead of just it sits on my table for another couple months. So was there an effect on hold times? Maybe, maybe not. How much was that? Did anybody who's ever done this quantify that? And that would be a consideration in terms of what I would call it a cost, sort of a general sense. So when I'm asked to make decisions about this, I'm going to want to feel like I'm informed about why are we doing this? Do we have evidence that it actually does what it's supposed to do? And understand that scenario a little more from that standpoint.
So perhaps an agenda item for a future meeting would be, a listing of why other jurisdictions have done this or why other libraries.
Yeah, I think we could prepare a continuing ed on that. And I know that when Peter asked about this a while ago, I went looking for a library that is in the same scenario that JMRL is, in which they were keeping and relying on fine revenue and made a decision to go fine free what the impact were. couldn't really find one. Most of the libraries that are doing this are not all, but many of them are departments of a jurisdiction, and the funding that was coming in from fines and fees was going back to the overall jurisdiction, so it didn't have quite the impact that JMRL was looking at. But certainly, I can prepare some information, some numbers on how many libraries across the state have moved to this, what their rationale was, and whether or not there's any data to say success. I will say that the staff have, in the past year, I know the staff's customer service committee has made a recommendation to me that JMRL go fine free, so I can ask them to present their reasoning there. And I know that the admin staff have worked hard over the last several years to prepare these kind of, here's how we would make this happen. But I don't think that this board has had an actual conversation about like, okay, who wants to do this and who doesn't want to do this? So I can present some information to have everyone on the same playing field when that discussion happens.
I would like that.
It would also be good to note that it's not an all or nothing decision, and so it'd be good to lay out a little bit of the menu of,
What are the options?
Right, because there's fines for a book being late versus fines for a book getting lost, which can be
Those are
very significant.
technically we consider those fees.
Fees,
Right,
right,
there are
yeah,
fines for
right.
things being late, but
Right.
I'm not aware of any libraries that don't still charge for materials that aren't returned or are damaged. My understanding is that they all still do. But it is a spectrum, like JMRL doesn't charge fines for juvenile
So
cards.
that's what I thought, and that was fairly recent, wasn't it?
It seems recent, but I think that was 10 years ago.
I was saying, my daughter, when she had her card, it was
Fine free.
fine free, so she just turned 19, if that helps.
It was a while ago. But there are also library systems that do, to Peter's point, that don't do fines, have no fines for seniors, or staff is also very interested in automatic renewals. So there are no fines for, if something doesn't have a hold on it, it would automatically renew and there wouldn't be an overdue fine for that. Currently, we charge an overdue fine for that. There are problems with that because there are issues, but I can lay out all those issues.
So yeah, I think that continuing education would probably be, to lay out.
That would be useful.
I'd be very
Also,
interested too in the effect on the population of our readers as well, or library users. Been dropped. Yeah. I'm going to be.
Yeah, that depends on what kind of data we can get from our peer libraries, whether or not any of them have tracked that to that level, but certainly. I know the state has tracked who's gone fine free, so they have a spreadsheet up with that information, but the impact.
A difference with our children.
We saw a drop in fine revenue.
Did the circulation go
I could.
up? Well, it would just be a question you were asking. Would it be, was that keeping people from checking out books?
Yeah, that's perception too.
And David, I would be interested in that. Share, just having learning about experiences of any comparable system. It doesn't have to be in Virginia to me. I mean, you've said statewide.
Oh, yeah. Generally, we look through Virginia.
I just want to know, what's it supposed to accomplish, and does it actually accomplish that? And anyone who can tell me they've had an experience one way or the other, I'd be interested.
One of the
to hear
reasons
it.
that we go to Virginia is because we know the people
Right,
in Virginia,
right.
and we're more likely to get.
But it's a
data
smaller pool, perhaps, than
I mean, maybe.
there may not be very many,
If the
sample
ALA,
size.
if the ALA could help us.
Right. I would,
Yeah, the ALA specifically has a lot of information on this because their platform is that fines are a bad idea.
so let's,
Do they do periodic reminders? Do you really have a book? Do you really remember that you took this book out or,
Yeah, I mean, that's what
Frowny
would
face.
happen.
Yeah.
Is that JMRL has better control over our messaging now than we had in the past. Like, we're sending out things when your books are overdue, especially electronically, and we can stagger those or send as many or as little as we want. Okay, great. This is good feedback, and I'll prepare that between now and when the survey goes out.
Are you reading it, or do you think you're gonna read it?
Any other
Next week.
comments, questions about the director goals? All right, Library director's report.
Okay, great. Brittany says 2016 was the year that we went fine free for two. Brittany, you should come to these meetings. Okay, I have just a few things to report today. I think I reported 2 months ago that the Friends had funded a second bank of lockers for Gordon Avenue. Now it has the only 2-bank system. Crozet had the first one initially, and immediately in December, Gordon Avenue's use went up and they surpassed Crozet for the first time. Crozet has always checked out the most of these locker checkouts, and Gordon Avenue took that right over. So it's been a tremendous success. So thanks to the Friends of the Library for funding that. Very popular service, and not only has it been successful in more usage, but it was kind of a little bit of a speed bump for people that were using the lockers before. If you had 10 things on hold, staff would wait till they would all get there so that you could get them, and now there's more room. They can kind of speed that along. It is time to start the internship, the NAACP internship application process. Alita served as the board's rep the past few years in the scholarship review committee. I'll be putting a call out to any interested.
Okay, I'm still here.
And I'm already having individuals and guidance counselors ask about it. So generally we close them in April. I'll keep you posted on the process there. Also in April, on the 24th, is going to be Poem in Your Pocket Day. This is also sponsored by the Friends of the Library, a very popular JMRL event where the folks on the staff committee get permission to print poems on a little scroll, roll them up, give them out in various local businesses, hospitals, schools, things like that. And you come to the library for a poem in your pocket that day. And I've always found them to fit my mood, except for last year. Last year was grumpy, and I was not grumpy.
Like fortune cookie.
This isn't mine, this must be yours.
JMRL is going to be encouraging, or is currently encouraging, primary, elementary, middle school age readers and homeschool readers to participate in the Virginia Readers' Choice Awards. We'll have extra copies of all the contenders there and ballot boxes at all the libraries. So if you read the slew that the state puts out, or I'm sorry, that this organization puts out, and then vote in the library, that's going to be held March 1st through April 30th. There's a blog post that's going up this week to explain more. And finally, the official announcement won't be out for a week or so here, but just a preview for the board and for everybody watching the recording. This year's same page author is going to be Earl Swift, and the title is Chesapeake Requiem. It's an award-winning nonfiction book about the fishermen of Tangier Island and the changes they've seen in the future of this shrinking community. Earl Swift is going to be attending the Virginia Festival of the Book to talk about this and also visiting JMRL branches. All JMRL's book clubs will be reading this title in March and April, and we're going to have hundreds of giveaway copies, including one for each member of the board here. Which I brought. It is, you should get started now. It's a thick book. There will be a quiz.
It'll be on the table.
We're very excited about this as a Virginia author, and he's been very, very generous with his time. There are going to be quite a few opportunities for all of our branches to interact with the author. And that's all I have to report today.
Other matters. Once, all right. So future agenda items. For our continuing education, next time we'll have something. Talk about fines and fees, or we'll put that.
I'm cautiously optimistic that we can pull that together in a month.
Okay, all right. If not, we'll do that in March. I have to remind myself it's in January. Is there a policy committee meeting before?
There should be. Yeah.
Okay.
Also, as a reminder, we're going to be in Louisa County in February. Yep, here we are. Time flies.
Okay.
I'll send out
Bad
some.
weather to traveling.
Hopefully, there won't be any bad weather. at that point.
AccuWeather long distance, the forecast looks
Good. For those interested, I'll arrange for a carpool leaving out of Charlottesville. You'll have to leave early because of the policy committee meeting.
And that's at 2 o'clock.
1:45.
And we, of course, will have a budget update. Can't fail to have a budget update. Are any of the other committees meeting between now and then? I don't believe they are.
I don't believe so unless the budget committee gets called on.
Any other agenda items off the top of your head? All right, if not, may I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor?
Right.
Good job.
Thank you.
We usually are unanimous.